Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to another episode of The Filmmaker's Life. This is an interview series where I talk to filmmakers. My name is Joanne Butcher. I'm a business coach for filmmakers, and I speak to filmmakers about their careers in filmmaking. And when I started this, I started it because of COVID, and I thought, oh gosh, my filmmaker friends who are usually racing around the planet and on set can come and talk to me. And then we just liked it so much we kept going. So what it's turned out in doing this for a year and a half is that every filmmaker has a completely different life. So I just think that's really interesting. So we have Allison Whitmer here today. She is the film commissioner for the state of Montana, and we're going to be asking questions, and then I'm going to ask questions, and then we'll open it up for questions in the last 10, 15 minutes. So the first question that I always love to ask Allison is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker? And was that a happy realization?
It was an interesting realization, and it came about in a sideways way. I was not intending to be a filmmaker, and I grew up in remote eastern Montana, and films were, you went to a theater. We didn't have television really. We had three television channels in North Dakota. And, the closest that we'd come to filmmaking was watching the PBS channels out of Canada. So it was not, I had done some theater in high school. It was not a thing. And I went to college for economics, specifically in consumer economics, lots of statistics, lots of research. And through a series of events, I ended up in the film department because of some problems in my world with economics. I'd had a health issue, and some of the upper level economics was unavailable to me at the time. So my advisor said, and I'll back up, this is the time when, in order to keep your health insurance, you had to be in school, the pre-existing condition problem. So I ended up in the film department as a very, what's the word for it? Hey, the filmmakers get handed a camera and a script, and they turn them loose, and they come back at the end of the semester. It's a perfect way for you to maintain your college studies. So I started doing it, and then I found out pretty quickly that filmmaking was kind of the ultimate consumer product. It had, you can consume a film over and over and over again in the same way. It's kind of like drinking Coca-Cola. It's the same product. But unlike Coca-Cola, it has layers and interpretations, and it's different every time. And then the back end accounting and analysis was really appealing. So this is about, say, 1994 or so, when I really immersed myself in the film department and really started to dive into how could I help other people make films.
Allison, this is just so amazing to hear you talk about this, because on the one hand, I also had a health issue which completely changed my career, and is how I came to end up being a film coach instead of uh, running an organization, because I was like, I don't want to run an organization anymore. And then the other thing is, I think that filmmakers are often the absolute last people to ever think about their films as products. And for you
Yes.
to say, for coming from economics, oh, this is the ultimate consumer product, is just fantastic, because I feel as though my whole role in life is to just help filmmakers see this as a bit more from the business perspective. So yes, I'm going to use that, the ultimate consumer product.
Oh, it's so much fun when you think about it that way too, because it ties into all the economic aspects. Films, media in general in the United States, one of the biggest export products of our country, huge amounts of marketing and accounting and now you see at the end of big films, 10,000 jobs were created to
Right.
make this film. But the great part is, oh, you guys, filmmaking is an incredible handcrafted mobile manufacturing product. No other industry in the world can take 150 people who've never met each other, have them show up at 8 o'clock Monday morning, and actually create a piece of product that is equal in quality to the stuff that they do 8 weeks later. It's incredible. It is so incredible. Filmmakers are so amazing.
Yes, that I totally agree with. But yes, this is really fantastic, just the way that you're seeing it. And I just love that that started when you were just so early on and came from economics and said, because I feel, recently actually, Lexi's husband, one of his students was pitching at an enterprise summit at the University of the Pacific, and they had never done it before. The media arts program hadn't been involved. It had been engineering and something else. I forget what it was. And at the end, one of the professors, who is an engineering professor, well, the film pitch won the
Oh,
competition.
good.
And the engineering professor, who's been involved in many businesses and had been doing this pitch thing for years, said, "Oh, I never thought about film as an investment opportunity."
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So, what I feel as though is very difficult for filmmakers when they are seeking funding for their films is to be able to translate what they have, that's kind of their heart and soul, into that consumer product, so that they can talk to potential investors about their products. As kind of a, I tend to not use that in front of filmmakers, but that's okay.
I mean, it is a product, and they are going for a marketplace, and there's different levels. If we're going to go into the always thorny idea of how does anyone see your product and pay for it, are you treating it as art, or are you treating it as a business? I mean, it's handled two very different ways. As art, you can get your friends together and volunteer, and that's an art piece. You're doing it for non-commercial purposes. If you're doing it as a business, then everything that we try and talk about in terms of marketing and still photography and websites and movie posters, like I have behind me, all of that is absolutely product oriented. And then I always think the twist is selling the creative to tie into that. So, did anyone see Titan recently?
Yes, I've seen it. So,
Yes.
Roxy in Missoula.
That is a film with a very interesting creative approach, and in the United States would not have been produced at all, I firmly believe. But it was produced overseas with lots of nations have film funds, produced with a number of partners who saw both the art and the commercial potential, and of course, very well received by the critical portion of the filmmaking world.
Yes, I actually was rather disappointed in the film, but when I watch a film, I always watch the credits so that I can see how this film was put together in terms of the financing and all of those pieces, because you can read that by
Right.
by reading the credits. So, Alison, I want to take you back to, there you were, you discovered film, you discovered the film department, you discovered that economics and film went together in this very cool way. What did you do next? What was your next step?
It was learning all the jobs on set. That was part of it. The school that I went to at Montana State is known for having a hands-on filmmaking program. They have some theory, but it's definitely a hands-on program. They want you to learn things. As one of my professors from New York put it, if it's not in focus, nobody cares. And he also had an aversion to zoom lenses. But his deal was, if you can't pull off the base technical, you can't go anywhere with your creative. So it was all about learning the technical as much as they could teach. And then the next part was finding a niche within that. And I ended up in production management, and the, what later would become a secondary piece of art department, because as it turned out, no one wanted to do paperwork. Paperwork is and remains the bugaboo for every single filmmaker. And in economics, we were doing tons of paperwork.
Yeah. Can
Right.
you tell us a little bit about being a production manager? I think you may be the first production manager that I've had ever on the series. So can you tell us a little bit about that job?
Sure. So there's a couple different levels, right? You have your full UPM, you have the line producer above that. A lot of people go into production managing and don't necessarily think about both the fiscal responsibility and the legal responsibilities until something goes terribly wrong. But you are both legally, fiscally, civilly responsible for the safe operation of your set. If you're, for example, if you're in the DGA, or even if you're working as a UPM, you're responsible for putting together the first budget and the schedule. And you may be working with people, but between you and the line producer, those are your responsibility. You're like being the CFO of a corporation. So keeping all that going is a deal. And I was talking to Lexi about this earlier, planning. The more detailed your plan, the easier it is to change it. And the more you're able to plan with your department heads, the more quickly they are able to work with your director. And this is on the back end where it's all about making sure your payroll is set up correctly and things like that. And then the front end, interpreting what the director wants to do with creative. A lot of UPMs don't do a lot with creative, just supporting it. That's what the department heads are for. And at the same time, with digital technology, you can indulge some of the creative, like, I want a giant spaceship. Well, now you can build the spaceship in VR and you can be in the spaceship, where before you had to build an actual spaceship. And you've all heard the stories about the vomit comet, where people get that 5 seconds of weightlessness, and those kind of things. Those are interesting. I've never had to budget that kind of stuff, but that is an interesting quandary to dive into. So really, though, you're responsible. You have the whole crew and the producers in your hand. You have one on one hand and one on the other. And you've got to balance the fiduciary responsibility with the creative responsibility.
This is really great because my clients have not necessarily had the budget to have a UPM. And so when things fall through the cracks, though, it can really, really be difficult. When there's that one piece of paper that you don't have signed, it can cause so many, many difficulties. A friend of mine, Jamie O'Brien, had a film, this is years ago, that won all these awards at Sundance. And they had one of the actors was noodling around on a guitar on set at one point, and they said, "Oh, why don't you play that on camera?" So he played his little song he'd made up while he was sitting around, and when the film finally got distribution, he sued.
Oh, for the royalties.
Yes,
Yes.
for the
Well,
royalties
that's the
of
thing.
the
If you
song,
don't have a
and the
UPM,
film never got seen.
yep. If you don't have a UPM, someone's going to end up doing it badly. And then you should assign someone. I mean, if the director is going to be the UPM, you got to say, hey, this is the thing. The one thing I wish that more festivals and more training pieces would put forth, and I even struggle with this, is deliverables from distributors. There's no really good list. Every distributor has kind of the same but different pieces. And it's not until the crew is long gone, accounting's long gone, UPMs are long gone, everybody's long gone, that someone says, hey, where are those signed location releases? And they don't exist. You have to go back and get them. That's the kind of thing that I wish that more filmmakers really started out with from the back with distribution.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, I work very closely with a distribution company, and we have our deliverables list, and they're very reluctant to share it. And it's not because they're hiding something or anything like that, but it's because things change.
True.
And so I went over this a lot with the distributor I work with, because they're afraid that somebody would somehow blame them that they didn't have the right deliverables because they were using a list that was 2 years old or something like that. And things change. And I understand that. And I can talk very openly with my clients, so I'm not worried about it, but I can see what they were worried about, you know?
I think even in general, letting filmmakers know that someone's going to expect certain things from them at the end, like actors' contracts, and like your actors' contracts are not just for SAG, your IATSE contracts are not just for SAG, your location agreements are not just a financial transaction between you and the location. There's someone else down the line that's going to want to see those things. Just making them aware of that is something we're emphasizing more, because you're right. There's a lot of different distribution companies. They all have different deals, and what works for the United States and what works for France and what works for Great Britain are completely different components.
But that's a really good point. Just even the thought of contracts for the actors, contracts for locations, contracts for the crew, all this basic legal paperwork. And that example that I gave, just to think that, I mean, I don't know that I would have caught that, the song made up on set, you know,
Right.
but some,
That's a very observant first AD that would have needed to catch that and say, hey, do we have clearance for that? Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
I can see why that mistake could have been made. And of course, right now, the whole world is watching the possible errors that can be made on a film set.
Oh,
With,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I read another article about it yesterday, very sad. Who is responsible for safety on the set?
I mean, ultimately, it comes back to, if it's a DGA shoot, the UPM is ultimately responsible. And then it's the first AD, they're supposed to work together. And then, of course, but it flows back from there. I mean, it flows back from every person that created that safety issue to all of the producers. So, that's going to be a big tangle for them to sort out. And, who is contractually supposed to be, there's a shop steward, there's all kinds of union layers, and then OSHA layers, and then state regulations too. So it is a very fluid. I'd always been informed by the people that mentored me that your line producers and your UPMs, and your UPM especially is managing the unit, is responsible whether they know about it or not.
Yeah, I have a first couple of first AG friends who work on big productions, and they are just hot about safety.
Yep.
And the article that I read yesterday about this case was that apparently the day before the shooting, more than one member of the crew had walked off the set and resigned, and
Right.
over safety concerns, over the handling of weapons, over shootings on set. And so I feel as though, what I know about human beings is that, you need to get paid, you need to have a job. To walk off a set and resign shows really difficult, bad situation that nobody should ever be in.
And that's, those safety questions, none of us may never know the exact process, but those type of safety questions would go through evaluation process, right? It would go from the crew member complaining to either the first AD or the UPM or the coordinator. And then that safety concern, they could also call in on an anonymous hotline to their union, because that was an IATSE picture. They could also call that into the safety hotline for the actors union, and they could call their own OSHA department in the state. I mean, there's a lot of options there. And so, we'll probably never know the exact sequence of the safety alert besides, unfortunately what happened in the final fatality that happened on set.
But it's very interesting that the UPM is the one who would be ultimately responsible and has that role.
That's
So
what I was always trained as. Yes.
Yep, yeah. So what did you do next? What was your first film experience like? Or no, because now you've learned all the jobs on the set, right? Which I
Well,
think is
no, I mean,
kind
you
of
have, right, you don't learn them all at once. I mean, you learn the pieces of them in school, right? And
mhm,
this always becomes the jump between learning things and doing them.
mhm.
And I was very, very lucky and to have a great mentor in my university who had uh, an extensive group of producers they worked with. And one of them happened to be in Montana, ironically doing The Horse Whisperer, which is the film behind me. And they'd also done A River Runs Through It. And they very graciously set me up to be, of course, your first paid gig as a production assistant on The Horse Whisperer. And I had come from an agricultural background. So I was quickly put in charge of running barbed wire gates and things like that in the pastures because I knew cows and I knew gates and I could run them. And I had another group of people that I ended up
And
knowing
what is
on
that
that.
job called?
Yeah. And so I worked on and off on that shoot most of the summer. And then that same producer was introduced me to some other people. And then through that, I got on some other films. And then I had some other connections and began doing independent films also. And I also fell in with a group of filmmakers that had a lot of films go to Sundance. So for a period of about 6 years, almost every film that we made, um, just by chance ended up in competition or premiering at Sundance. It was I look back
Wow.
at now and it was a very interesting time. I had no clue about the intricacies of film festivals.
Ah, so what were some of those films that you went to Sundance with? Because that's amazing. I have a
Yep.
producer friend, Brian Benson, who it seems every year has a film that he takes to Sundance. I can quite, and he actually said that doesn't know which one is good. If he's got, I'm working, he's like, well, that one got in, but why didn't that one get in? So,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes. We had some great films. We had a film done by Ron Judkins called The High Line. And that was a nice piece about a girl who searches for her family that she doesn't know she has. That was at Sundance, I believe, in 1999. And then we had The Slaughter Rule, one of Ryan Gosling's first films, and that was with Clea Duvall. That was done by Alex and Andrew Smith. North Fork with the Polish brothers. Back at Sundance again with Walking Out with Alex and Andrew. Um, a Britney Spears comedy film that was in the Sundance, I believe, night showings called Britney Baby One More Time. And we shot that in Milwaukee. That was not made in Montana. Yeah, a whole series of really incredible films.
What was the Ryan Gosling film again?
It's called The Slaughter Rule. It's about six-man football.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think I was at Ryan Gosling's first Sundance appearance, which was The Believer, about
Hmm.
the Jewish Nazi.
Yep. It would have been
That
pretty
was,
close to that time
yeah, yeah.
period.
I think
Yeah.
that I remember watching that film and just thinking, oh my God, I just saw what is going to be one of the biggest stars ever.
Yes. We were thrilled on that film. I mean, that film was freezing cold in the winter. We had Ryan Gosling and David Morse, who is fantastic. And so we're in Great Falls, Montana, running around making this film. And everybody just stepped up. And when you watch it, you can feel how cold it is. And Ryan Gosling, spent the entire time in Montana. And I've heard it's the film where the art department and others, said, here's how you prop drink and prop smoke, and here's a bunch of tips. And so he was a young man and a pleasure to have on set.
that is so nice to hear because I just remember seeing The Believer and just being so blown away by his performance. It just was
Yep.
like I
Oh,
know. Oof. And
well,
to
we also had on that shoot, we also had Amy Adams.
ah
Um, and she went and did Catch Me If You Can, I believe, right after ours. And you could tell that she was on the way too.
yes, yes, it's just interesting seeing people go from the indie space into, Hollywood and sometimes more, sometimes less. I think one year I was at Sundance and Rosamund Pike had 3 films at Sundance. You
Oh,
know,
awesome.
yeah. So just every now and then, there'll be a performer that they just jump off the screen and they just stand out so much. The one most recently, well, this has nothing to do with Sundance, but Viola Davis in How to Get Away with Murder. And there are all these
Oh,
actors,
right.
they're all good, and everything. And then Viola Davis comes on. It's just like, oh my God, it's just this different level. It's really fun to see that.
Are you thinking, where did that come from? And how do
Yeah.
I tell people about it? Yes.
And why is she just on a different planet than everybody else, on the screen? It's great. So, so these string of Sundance movies, what did you? So you were going from being in bigger budget films to this indie world. How did you navigate the whole Sundance thing? I'm not sure if I'm asking a good question here, but
Oh, no, I will tell you it was very basic because we didn't, film festivals were not really a point of conversation at our film school or amongst my filmmaking group. It was all our team of people in Montana did high dollar movies at the time, and they did commercials. And so independent films were kind of this very, when we were talking 1997 to 2005, very kind of scrappy. It's how it is. The commercial people and the union people, they were SAG pictures, but they were not, these are $2 million and under pictures. So but that was the jobs that was coming in. So I would do some indie films, and I would work in sound, or I would work in props, or I'd work in wardrobe and I costume, and then I would coordinate, or I'd be an assistant coordinator, and then I'd go back to working as an art director. And so kind of picked and choose around. I'm not the greatest grip, but I can put together a frame. Not the greatest electrician, but I can plug some stuff in without killing myself, things like that, transportation. And then that was a great basis to learn what frustrated a crew and what kept them going. We worked one show in the art department where it was impossible to get to printers, and so everything had to be, everything had to be hand done, and we had to send stuff back and forth. And of course, at that time, there's not a lot of internet access. People don't have cell phones. We're still in the world of payphones. It's a very you can see how difficult it is if you're trying to order a piece of equipment from the side of a mountain and you can't communicate with anyone. So I found that if you can plan ahead, get together here, the department heads, and create a channel for them to really communicate, you can alleviate a lot of pressures on the set for the set crew. And then when it came to, coordinating and production supervising and then UPMing, we could waylay a lot of that stuff. Just be like, hey, art department, we're renting you a U-Haul truck. And at the same time, we're going to rent you a dolly and 2 6-foot long tables. And then they have a workspace and wheels right away. If they didn't need them later, that was fine, but they'd at least start out with that.
that's really great. I love that you're talking about, what are the pain points, because I think that's the way I think. It's like I know where filmmakers get stuck, and so if you know that in advance, you don't have to get stuck there. You know, what you were saying about the paperwork, for example.
Right,
But there's no reason to get stuck there. You just need, but you do need to know about it in advance. You know,
right.
So I guess you must have been really relieved when cell phones came about.
I had this giant Kyocera cell phone and it could do all these interesting things. I finally had to give it up when one of the cell phone networks went away, but it was like a Palm Pilot slash cell phone and it could beam things to other people. It was great. And Joanne, you probably talk about with your filmmakers a lot on independent films. You either solve your problems or you solve them with money. And solving them with money costs you so much more than solving their problems. And the way you solve your problems is by planning.
Mm.
And big budget films, have that cushion to say, oh, we fixed, we broke your railing at your house, we'll fix it. Independent films should be planning to not break the railing in the first place.
Yeah, and not to put themselves in a situation where the railing can be broken.
All right.
Yeah, definitely. The one time that I worked on a gazillion-dollar Hollywood movie, and I tell people this all the time, and I ask the question, who was the first person who showed up on set? I was part of the location crew, so we
Oh,
were
yep.
already working. But who was the first person from LA who showed up? It was the accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And so the accountant got the biggest office, the corner office, with all the windows, and they were the last to leave. But the accounting department was there for the duration, no matter,
Yes.
what else. So everything about paperwork and about money had to be the priority. And I just like it when independent filmmakers follow those practices. Okay, so we don't have millions and millions and millions of dollars, but we can follow those practices. So to me, having clarity about the money first is paramount.
I've had so many independent filmmakers ask why they need accounting,
Oh,
why they
interesting.
need that position. And if you really don't hire accounting, you fail pretty miserably.
Mm,
It's not a pretty sight.
yeah, yeah, that's a very significant piece. So after the wave of Sundance movies, what did you do next?
Well, it was a mix. I was doing these independent films and then reality. I had done in 2001 what I would call blue chip reality. We worked with WNET in New York and with wall to wall television in the UK, and we did a very popular PBS docu series called Frontier House. And that was at the beginning of the reality TV wave. We were up for an Emmy against the first season of Survivor. So this is the beginning of reality television. And our show ended up being the number one show on PBS, bigger than Ken Burns. It was massive. And they had been very successful with this format overseas, 1900 House. And then I went from that and I was at Sundance and got completely by chance, got a side gig at the Winter Olympic Games there. So it was a little bit of sports. And then ended up in an interesting rotation of a little bit of reality television, independent films, and then we still had our pieces of commercial space, car commercials. Montana does a lot of car commercials, and then still photo shoots. So at that time,
Why
uh,
is that? What's with the car commercials?
oh, lots of beautiful winding roads in the mountains
Ah,
with snow. Oh yes, lots of lots of car commercials. And then I picked up a gig from a friend of mine with an overseas advertising agency that created all the photography for a brand called Marlboro Classics, which was a Valentino brand that they worked with. You've seen the Marlboro Man on his horse, in Monument Valley. And so Valentino licensed this brand and has overseas and still does an entire clothing and store line of very beautiful, upscale, casual Western wear uh, for the Italian and Asian markets. And so I worked with a French producer for 5 years working on those. And that was great. We went all over the United States, lots of things in the West, still doing a little bit of film, still doing commercials, still doing a little bit of reality. Another producer friend of mine ended up working on The Amazing Race for many years. So I've done several pieces of Amazing Race. That is some serious UPMing and planning. You go into a place and you hire 40 PAs for a week. Literally, we would hire people off the street. We're like, you working tomorrow? Great. Come with us.
That sounds great.
It was, yeah.
Wait, we'll put you in movies.
We'll put you to work immediately. And then, I was UPMing pretty much full time at that point and getting into bigger budgeted projects. And so now I've been at the Film Commission for 5 years. So that's been a nice mix of everything to be able to have good conversations with filmmakers who want to bring their projects to Montana.
Fabulous. And I wonder, so now that you're kind of on the other side where the filmmakers are coming to you, what are the kind of common questions that filmmakers come to you with when they're considering Montana for their film?
A lot of questions are about, right now, Westerns are very popular. So we have lots of questions about ghost towns, what things look like in the West. And we have a lot of expanses that are great for that. We also have a full incentive program and a grant program. So we get a lot of questions on how the financing end of it, which Joanne, you work with. And then we also get projects that are looking for landscape as a character. And Montana's very good at that, as incorporating landscape and character, which allows you to concentrate on your actors, make the landscape become something that evokes. You can maybe cut some dialogue, or you can just put people into the landscape. I don't know if anyone's seen Certain Women. That is a Laura Dern piece with Kelly Reichardt. Once again, another Sundance film. And she used landscape very effectively to convey the inner world of the characters. And then other times it's very specific. I need an urban downtown for a car commercial that I can close off on, the first week of June. And I'm looking for this kind of very specific feel. And then we go on a search for that. But it's a mix. We have like the very commercial piece, this is exactly what we want. Like car commercials, we want a winding road that we can be no more than 15 minutes from a hotel. And then we have other pieces that are willing to explore a little bit more. And there's always the constraint of logistics. I have some beautiful locations that you need a tent for. You're not going to be staying in a hotel. So that, I'm sure, Joanne, you have lots of conversations with filmmakers about how to do logistics and financing. If you really want it, you can do it.
Do you ever have filmmakers take you up on the tent?
Yes, I had a filmmaker. We did a film called Jimmy P with Benicio del Toro up in Browning, Montana. It's a period piece. And some of the crew lived in a teepee because there was no housing in someone's yard. It wasn't like they're out on the prairie, but yeah, they slept in a teepee and used the facilities in a house nearby. So every once in a while.
My real claim to fame is that I slept in a teepee my first 2 nights in Montana.
Nice.
So that was the way I started in Montana. So when a filmmaker wants to come to you and goes forward with their film and is interested in using the tax incentives, how does that process work? How do they start down the road where they can actually take advantage of the tax incentives?
We are pretty clear up front. We have a list of things. We talk to them up front. We let them know that it's a transferable income tax credit and that it has to be sold by them to monetize it once they've done the forms. We have an application that they fill out. There's a fee. And we have pre-copies of these applications so they can see what's required. There are some floors. We want to make sure that they hit the financial floors for it. If you don't hit the financial floors, then you shouldn't apply. And we also, have a lot of conversations with them about what they want to achieve, where their financing is looking at. Films that are looking for quick turnaround on their tax credit might not be a good fit financially for us, even if they are creatively. And we want them to be prepared to engage in filmmaking with accurate scripts, accurate schedules, accurate breakdowns, at least a first wing through them. We do get some projects that come, script first and go from there, and they're looking for people to break it down. You have a year from when you are certified in the tax credit program to go into production. If you don't go into production within a year, then your certificate expires and you have to reapply. So we're looking for pretty close to shovel-ready projects.
Okay. And is there a minimum in terms of the budget?
If you're a smaller production, your minimum spend in Montana has to be estimated at 50,000 or above. And then if you're a bigger show, we like you to be 300,000 and above.
That is a very low floor. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really handy. But remember, once again, there's some accounting involved. So if your budget is $100,000, how are you going to account for that? And is your, on a lower budgeted project, your fee's $500 on our end and $500 on revenues end. So that's $1,000 you're spending on fees. And you have to do a CPA report, which is about $3,500 to $5,000. So you're looking at a $6,000 potential participation cost before you turn a wheel.
Yes.
And yeah, and if your production can't handle that kind of expenditures in their budget, if you're not planned for that, then that program is maybe not for you.
Right, right. And are there other programs? Is that the one program that
Oh, no, we have another one.
I thought so?
Yes. And this one's open right now for anyone who's watching. It is the Big Sky on the Big Screen grant program. And it has 3 components with different levels of financial participation. We have the feature film and television for larger projects. We want you to look at having a $350,000 spend or greater in Montana on that. And that's big. Projects in that category have received $100,000 grants. And then we have a resident grant section it's for the same thing for feature film, television, long form documentary. That has a floor of a $50,000 spend. I believe I might be a little off on that. It's all online, but that grant category, we can award from anywhere from $1,000 to $100,000. You have to be writer, director, producer. You have to be a resident of Montana to apply, and you have to prove your residency. And then we have short form, and short form has a grant limit of $50,000 per project. And that is short form music videos, documentary, a whole list of things, short films, obviously. And that application process is open right now. There is no fee to apply. Stacy Zilak, who handles grants and incentives, talks to people every day. We have the application forms on our website, and it's a very simple process. You do have to be prepared. It's a pitch, it's a budget, it's a schedule. We want you to have some secured financing. We are not your only financer, and we've had really great success. We've had films out of this program go to Sundance, go to South by. We have one that I think's been in 15 festivals so far. They've gotten major distribution. We have a project called 2 Yellow Lines, which is coming out this next week. And one of their partners in distribution was 101 Studios, which helps produce Yellowstone. So, we've got some great connections. It's a really fantastic grant program.
I don't think I know of another state that has a short film grant program like that.
I haven't really looked into what some of the other states are offering. When this program was formed, we were looking at, and this is before I was the commissioner, but the commissioner at the time was looking at the typical career path of a filmmaker. You go to school, you get out of school, you move to Los Angeles or New York, you work away in those cities for 10, 15 years, and then maybe you come back to Montana. And one of the reasons they're moving to those places because of creative opportunities. So the thinking is, let's provide creative activities through this grant program, because we promote Montana. That's our mission, to promote Montana to outside producers. And if our creatives inside the state have these opportunities to make their own material, maybe they won't move to LA right away, or maybe they'll move to LA and then come back faster. And so we feel like we've really been able to advance people's careers through this program.
And you know, one of the things to me, every now and then somebody will say to me, "Oh, so you live in LA?" You know, and I said, "No," you know, and I think one of the things I fundamentally believe is that filmmaking can be done anywhere. And I certainly have clients all over the place, and people are making films, people are making small films, short films, feature films, big budget projects all over the world. So I don't see why people have to go to LA or even New York. And but I think that it's really great when a state has tax incentives and all of that. That's really, really helpful. But I swear I've never heard a state offering a short film program. I think that's very special. There are other short film grants around,
Mm-hmm.
but for a state to do that, I think that's unique.
Well, we have, I think we have a great history of, you know, short filmmaking. I'll take you all the way back to what we know is the first film piece, which is Thomas Edison had sent a film crew across the country in 1897, and they took the first tourist videos in Yellowstone Park. So we feel we've been doing short film for a very long time.
That's great. Thomas Edison, that is pretty great. I thought you were going to talk about like Nanook of the North. I was like, oh, maybe they made Nanook of the North in Montana instead of where I thought it really was.
Well, in features, we've been making features here since about 1922. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gary Cooper's from Montana. What more could you ask for?
right. So thank you so much, Allison, and let's open it up for questions. I'm really, really thrilled and encouraged to hear about what Montana is doing in terms of tax incentives, and I have a friend who has a script that he's written for Montana, and the other day he told me he's thinking that he'll shoot it in Canada, and I'm like, what? No.
Come here, come here.
No, absolutely not. So let's open it up for questions. I see Nancy
I have
has
one.
her hand
Yeah.
up. Thank you. And I love it when people come on camera and raise their hands so that I can actually see. But go ahead, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you. And Joanne, to your comment about shooting in Canada, I hate that cut bank, movie cut bank
Oh,
in Canada. Crazy. I just want to say thank you, Allison. You're always so generous with your time. And I love hearing about your background. I knew some of your background, but didn't know all of it. But you're always so available to even small towns in Montana, like Little Hamilton. I love it. This had a really question that I run it by Stacy, but I was curious, like when you ask on some of the grants, like named talent, like how far up does our named talent have to be?
what we're really we're asking for name talent because we want filmmakers to be hiring actors that can pull off their project.
Right.
And we want them to be looking more than their first glimpse. We want you to work at it, right? If you're going to go to the effort to spending a couple $100,000 or $1 million, once again, we know that name talent will get your film distributed. And name talent can be a number of things. A person who is huge in the horror world may not be huge in dramatic films, or a person that's huge in sci-fi may not be big in action adventure films. So it's kind of your version of name talent. And maybe you have an up and coming talent. It's right. But we know that if you are going for a large grant and you tell us that you have X amount of money in your budget and you have this kind of director and you've gone to the effort, then we're going to say, okay, what are you doing to bolster not only the marketability of your project, but once again, it's like Joanne talking about the actresses and like Ryan Gosling, they come on screen and they're luminous and you're like, oh, we've elevated. We really want the filmmakers to search for those people who are going to elevate their project. And it's okay if you don't have name talent. But if you do, we appreciate the effort. That's
Okay.
because we know it's a lot of work to chase down agents and managers and talk to some actor who's never heard of you, never been to Montana. He doesn't know if they really gonna want to go work in the snow in November, to persuade them. We know that's a lot of work, and that's a reward for doing that work.
Well, thank you.
Nancy, can I ask you, are you working on a project that you want to shoot in Montana?
Oh, I've got several in development, right? But there is one that involves veterans and PTSD. And I'm also working with a foundation out of DC, and they have celebrity ambassadors on their boards, on the board of directors. So I'm going after them. So those are celebrity talent. Some are baseball players, and one is golfer. So that would be kind of cool too. Do a cameo, right? All we have to do is make a cameo, right? Because we can include their name as a in the poster.
Yep. Well, the late Ed Asner was a great contributor to the arts in Montana. He did a lot of theater here, and that brought a lot of people to the theater that had never gone before because they knew his name.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So thank you, Joanne. Something like that. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. It sounds as if you have some fabulous potential people there.
Yeah. This connection. It's an adaptation from a novel series. The author of the novel series is connected to the DC Foundation, building homeless shelters for veterans, and so that's how it all starts connecting. Yeah.
Wow, that just sounds like a fantastic project. Good luck with that. Good luck
Thank
with it. I saw a hand raised. Heather, did you want to ask a question? Okay, who else has a question? Let's see if, okay, Mark, go ahead.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes.
I thank you so much for this really insightful and interesting interview. My name is Mark Gordon. I'm an independent filmmaker living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm working on my second feature documentary. The first one was picked up by PBS in over 100 markets. And we have, in New Mexico, we have a rebate program. So I know how important accounting is because they audited every single receipt and they said, well, you got cash back here at the store. So I was like, how did you find that? So there was they instituted a program here where banks would loan you money based on your anticipated rebate. And you had to be careful that you only borrowed a percentage of that, and then that was paid back. They had some. It didn't run too smoothly. Our banker was not excited about it because things took so long and got screwed up. But I have a question. You had said that it's a tax credit, and that you have to get the money from someplace else or sell the tax credit. Could you explain that to me?
Sure. So unlike New Mexico, which does a cash rebate where the money comes directly from the state treasurer, this is tied to more of an income tax piece. So you submit you do all the applications, you submit your costs, and you get a percentage of those costs that go into your credit certificate. And so let's say you spent $1 million and your credit certificate was $20,000. So that's not $20,000 in cash. That is $20,000 that you can use on your own company tax liability. Let's say that your garage sale at the end of production was incredibly successful and you made $100,000 on it. And now you're going to owe income tax to the state of Montana, right? So you can use that credit to offset that income tax for up to 5 years. You can split it that way. And then you can take that credit out onto the open market and you can go to anyone who has a current or future tax liability in Montana. And you can say, hey, let's say oil and gas company, I have a tax credit for $20,000 and I want to sell it to you for $15,000. And I will trade you my tax credit for $15,000. You pay a transfer fee on it. There's some other technical pieces on that. And the oil and gas company says, great, I pay $15,000. I get $20,000 of tax credit that I can also use for 5 years. We've got a deal. Let's do a transfer certificate. That's how you monetize that.
Well, and then you also have grants.
Right. A separate program.
Okay.
Yes.
So I love Montana. The Bozeman Film Festival screened my first feature about 2 years ago. So
oh, which one?
Awakening in Taos, the Mabel
Yes.
Dodge story.
Yes, I was at that festival.
Oh, great. Yeah. And I understand that Beth is no longer with them.
She's no longer with them, and it's been taken over by the group, the Bozeman Arts Live, that still lives in Montana. She's still
Great.
doing the art. She's just not running that particular festival.
Great. Well,
So-
thank you so much. I love your state.
Oh, so glad to hear you were accepted into that. That was a great piece.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead, Lexi.
I have a question. Well, also, first of all, I would like to do a quick apology to everyone who had trouble getting in today. I'm glad you made it here. And I'm going to have a recording of this interview on YouTube within an hour or two of us wrapping here. But Allison, thank you so much. This has been so interesting. I'm fascinated by the business side of film and what you do with that. Do you think that, I mean, I love filmmaking and I think it's a lot of fun and I would love to do it as long as I am able, but do you think it's possible for someone to create a career for themselves in this business side of it without doing the like nitty gritty on the ground hard work of like working on productions? I know you have so much experience doing that and that led you to where you are now. Do you think that's necessary?
I think that anyone who had a basic business degree and was willing to engage in certain departments like accounting's a big one. There's a massive shortage of payroll accountants and accounting clerks and first accountants and seconds right now. I think anyone with a basic business degree could easily go into accounting and enjoy that. And, you know, filmmaking is all cost accounting. There's no income side of it until later. That's the distribution end. It's all cost accounting. You start out with a pot of money and you hope you still have some left at the end. And that makes the accounting part of it actually quite simple. Tracking the accounting is the complicated part, but a basic business degree, you don't have to be a CPA. Then you also have, if you're working in, for example, if you're working in permitting, like Joanne's larger location department she worked in, you could go into that with like a surveying or an engineering degree and be really good at accounting. You could come into that from any type of business and take that, how a location department accounts for all of its locations and the permitting and the payments on that. You could have a very interesting career in locations by being the coordinator, not necessarily being on set. And then you have, oh my goodness, all the fabricators and the costume makers and the people who do, there's, you know, I know these don't get broadcast much, but the Scientific and Technical Academy Awards are all about engineering and robotics and explosives. And there's all that stuff. There are engineers that do nothing but automobiles. And all of that stuff happens on the back end. There's fabrication for all these interesting superhero costumes. There's work in plastics and in fire and in aerospace, all kinds of incredible careers that are not like physically right next to the cameras.
Wow, so cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Lexi?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it did. I guess, yeah, it did. Thank you.
Another thing that I started doing years ago was having, when I watch a movie, I always watch the credits. And I'm always looking, but people at the cinema are standing in front of me and I'm like this, I'm looking at the credit, because the bigger the movie, the longer the credits. All of those are jobs, you know. And I remember I was working at this, or teaching at this juvenile justice facility one time, and I told the kids to do this, you know, I said, stay and watch the credits. And as you watch the credits, just go, that's my job, that's my job, that's my job, that's my job. Because I just want people to shift their consciousness to think it's not just people out there making movies, you know, that could be me. And it doesn't have to be necessarily that I'm a producer and I'm making the movie. It could be that I'm the person helping the grip get the lighting right, you know, or whatever that is, or holding the boom pole, you know, that all of these things are ways that people can work in the industry. I just want to see if Heather is no, she's not. Okay, but there's Heather's mom. I see it's the top of the hour, and I just want to thank you so much, Allison. If anybody's jumping up and down with a question, you know, raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm gonna let Allison go. But thank you so much, and you know, I really hope.
Oh, wait, is Heather waving her hand?
Heather can speak. Okay, go ahead, Heather. Go and ask ahead, and she's been dying to ask a question, so I want to know what it is. Go ahead, Heather.
Heather, you're muted. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you. You're muted, Heather. So, oh, and there she left. So, but I do, oh, Abby, go ahead. Abby, go ahead.
Hi, just a quick follow-up question, kind of like tagging along with Lexi, what she asked, but what do you think is the best way, or how would you recommend for someone starting out who wants to get into working on like films as a career? How would you suggest that I go about finding a job in Montana, just on a set, just starting out? I graduated from the University of Montana during the pandemic and in a creative writing program, so networking has been like especially tricky for me. And so I just, like, wild circumstances have brought me back to Montana from DC, and I'm just trying to use this as like a career opportunity. So how do you suggest I go about?
You know, there's a couple of different ways. We have a crew listing where you could, if there's something that you like, you're a writer, if there's something, or if you like a certain type of work in film, you already know, you could get listed in our recruiting section. And the next part of that I'm going to say is talking to people and getting to know people. We're going to be in Missoula for the Montana Film Festival later in November. And so, like, for example, Nancy is still here. She's a filmmaker down in Hamilton. And at some point, she probably needs some crew. And
Yes.
you could reach out to Nancy and be like, hey, you know, I'm your new minimum wage worker.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
anybody crewing up in Montana needs help, so you can usually come on at a lot of levels.
But there's
Absolutely.
really, yeah, like saying Nancy could totally use some help. But it's also, we have a couple local grip and electric houses. If you are interested at all in things like accounting or clerking or coordinating, being a production assistant, if you have a clean driving record, those are kind of entry points. But it's also like, hey, I did costumes in high school and I can sew. Then we can put you in touch with the 6 or 7 wardrobe people that work here and costume departments. And then you kind of get your world in that way. Or, you know, it happens in random ways. I got a call late last night from a show that needed someone to be a helper to a child who was going to be on set. Last minute thing, something had come up and they wanted to make sure that someone was there to have eyes on this child all the time in a tradition what they did. And it was literally, we called around, found someone who had a teaching license and was used to working with children, and they showed up at 7 o'clock this morning to a set. It can be a very like spur of the moment piece too, but in general.
Film is so like that. When I was working for this locations company, one night I was at work late for some reason, I don't remember, and the phone rang at 7 o'clock. And this is just so typical. Phone rang at 7 o'clock at night, and they said, we're landing from LA in the morning, and we're making a car commercial, and we need this, and this. And And I'm like, okay, you know, they think it's normal.
Yeah.
They think that's normal. You know, I don't see that in other industries,
No.
but in film, that's normal. So if you can kind of go with that, that's that could be the qualification that you need. You know, yeah, I can go with that. You know, we'll have it all ready for you by 11 o'clock in the morning when you start shooting. You know,
Just like that, just out of thin air, it will magically appear. Yeah, that's the magic of locations and producers. But Abby, like, you can go to our directory and we have coordinators and UPMs there, and you can write them all an email and say, hi, I'm Abby. I have zero experience, but I can write and I can run a computer and I have a clean driving record. I live in Missoula. I can travel, you know.
And
I don't need a lot.
There's about 4 Facebook sites.
Yes.
Get on those.
Montana filmmakers and media artists, Montana actors, our Montana Film Office page, and you can put yourself out and be like, you need someone to be a assistant or to do this, give me a call. And you'd be surprised, you'll get that 7 o'clock phone call usually going, hi, remember me? You emailed me 6 months ago. Can you show up tomorrow morning?
Yeah, and I think that the main thing saying about the
audio, yay.
Oh, Heather, 1 second. Just to wrap up with Abby, I just wanted to say that that exercise of just looking at the credits and just saying, that's my job, and just trying to get past this idea that film is something out there that those nameless, faceless people do, and actually, you know, there are people here who make films all day long. So, yeah, Heather, go ahead and ask your question.
She's muted.
She's gone again. Well, once again, Allison, thank you so much. And I hope this interview ends up resulting in a number of films getting made in Montana.
Oh, yes. Our grant program's open. Our applications to the incentive program went all year round. The only base requirement for the grant program, besides the financials, you have to shoot your 50% or more of your project here. So apply away, bring it on. Yeah. Stacey will be very happy to talk to you about it.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks at the Montana Film Festival.
Yes.
In Missoula. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really glad we got to talk about movies today.
Yes. It's what I
Thank you, Allison.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Luck.